All right, so here we are. We've done our 7 rounds of stockinette. We're still on our cable needle, and we're going to switch to our double pointed needles now, because as soon as you start decreasing, there is no way this is going to fit us. It barely does, as it is for the newborn size. Okay, so the next thing it says on the pattern is that you need a few stitches, move your marker if you're using a marker, and then start your decreases. And the reason for that is that, let me show you in a bigger hat, that this way if you start, let's see, where is I think this is the back, and the invisible seam is somewhere in here. If we start decreasing right here in the middle where we are, then when we get to the front, we would have one of the decreases right in the middle of the forehead, which is not so attractive. So if we move them a little bit, they'll be centered on the forehead. That's the only reason for that. So for the newborn size, we're going to knit 4 stitches. 3 and 4, and now I'm going to abandon this needle for now, this double pointed needle that I'm inserting, and this is going to be the beginning of my new round, and I'm going to start my decreases now. And once you start doing your decreases, you'll have 6 stitches on each needle, and that's where at the beginning of each needle you'll be decreasing every other round, and this way you won't need markers. And that is the reason for the 4 needles, for the 5 needle set instead of the 4 needle set, because you have evenly distributed over 4 needles and just decreasing at the beginning of the needle. Now, if you're making the bigger sizes, you'll have a preparatory row where you're making a 2 stitch decrease before you start decreasing 4 times. Okay, so pay attention to that if you're making those bigger sizes. So for the newborn, we're decreasing, and now that's our first stitch. 2, 3, 5. All right, now we have 6 stitches on this first needle, and move on to the next. 2 together. Need 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 stitches. Again, there are 6 stitches on your second needle. Now 2 together, and now 1, 2, 4, 5. Now again you have 6 stitches. Now that's a lot of needles right now, but we're going to get rid of the cable. Now, 2 together again. Now that's the last one on your cable needle, which you're not going to need anymore. And now you're just going to need these previous stitches to get to the new beginning of the row. Okay. Now you're going to need an even round here. Okay, and then again you're going to decrease 2 stitches. You're going to need 2 together at the beginning of each round, every other round, until you have only 1 stitch left on each of your 4 needles, and that's when we're going to need the I-cord for the end. All right, so go do that, and when you only have 4 stitches, we'll do the I-cord. Okay, so here are all our decreases. Now remember, they're every other row. So you do your decreases at the beginning of each needle, and then you knit an even round I should say, no row. Okay, and when you get to the very top, here are your 4 stitches, and we're going to use these to make the I-cord. Now, before we start, we need to put all this in one needle. So, okay. Here's the yarn, okay? So you're gonna use the needle where your yarn is, where your working yarn is, and you're gonna start moving all 4 stitches here. Okay. And the last one. Now you could have done that as you were knitting. That's your preference, but I thought I would show you. Okay, so you have all 4 stitches on one needle. You have your working yarn here, but you're not going to turn your work. You're going to knit this way. You're going to slide your stitches to this end. And yes, your yarn is on the wrong end, but that's how you make I-cord. So now you're going to give it a pretty good tug. Knit your first stitch, second, third, and fourth. And again, slide them to the other, oops, don't let them fall though, to the other end. Same thing. Yarn on the wrong side, give it a good tug. Okay. Knit all the stitches and slide it again. So you're not turning your work, you're just sliding them to the other end of your double pointed needle. And I think maybe one more round or row here. So again, give them a good tug. And there's your little pixie top. And all you need to do now, I'm almost out of yarn, you would cut your yarn. And in fact, I am going to cut it. You're going to thread it through your yarn needle. And you're going to get it through all 4 stitches. Make it tight. And now just slide it to the inside of the hat. Okay. And it needs a little, you need to give it ease on the inside before you start. So that's how easy it is to make I-cord. And now we're just going to weave in your ends. And everybody has a different way of doing this. I like to go around in a little bit of a spiral. And again, if you're working with wool, you can get away with a pretty short seam here, because once you wash it, it will slightly full and it will stay in place very nicely. Okay, so I'm gonna cut this. And now let's just weave in. So these are the ends from attaching the ear flaps, and we're going to do the same thing. Just going to bring them in. And again, see how there is a little bit of a loose stitch there in the join? You can fix it by bringing your tail in and pulling it. So you tighten that in, and now you bring it to the inside. See, and you can't see it, and now you just weave it in on the inside, and that will keep that edge tight. Now I left my tail here a little too short, so make sure you give yourself a little more room. Leave it like that. And now let's deal with this center seam, which on the newborn size is a little harder to see because it's such a short seam. So I have a different sample here with a few more rows, and I'll show you how to do it, and then we'll do it there together. But just to demonstrate the technique, it's easier to do it here. So this is how I like to do it, and it is, you know, kind of a personal way to do it. This row is not garter stitch. This is the cast on row. So I like to go into this first stitch down. I'm going from top to bottom, and I'm pulling it together, and now I'm coming back up on the other stitch. This is where the yarn is coming from, see? So now I'm going to come up through this stitch, and I'm going to tighten it up, and that gives me a nice, fairly continuous spot to start. Okay, and now this is the bottom part of the stitch. This is the top part. Okay, this is the bottom loop, this is the top loop. All right, and in this one is a little harder to see, but here is the top and here is the bottom. Okay, so on one side you're going to do the bottom loops, on the other side you're going to do the top loops, and I'm going to start with the bottom one, and I come from bottom to top on the bottom loop, and on the next one I'm going to go into the top one. Now I go to the next row, again bottom one on this side, and on the corresponding one I go into the top one. If I can see it, here it is, bottom, top. Bottom one, and on the other side, top one, and here bottom one, and here top one. And see how it is a very invisible seam. And now at the very top there's usually a gap, so you just go through the back, go to the back, I mean, wherever you can actually. Let's do it here. And bring it back out. That looks pretty good. And now just slip it back, and you'll have a pretty invisible seam. And now let's do it on the newborn size. All right, so again, we're going to join the cast on, and I'm going to come down on that first stitch, pull it together, and come up on the other side. Okay, and now bottom stitch here, top stitch here. Okay, so I'm going to come up through the bottom stitch on this side, and now I'm going to come up through the top stitch on this side. And somehow on the newborn size it never looks as good, but I think it will have to do. And now just do the same thing, just close that gap there. And we'll come through here. And there it is. It's not as nice as when you have more rows to work with, but not so bad either. The last step, which is getting a length of yarn, you thread it through your needle and just slide it right at the end of the ear flap. And now you have 3 strands to make your braid. Okay, so you're just going to braid them for as long as you would like. Okay. And I'm not going to show you how to do this. I assume you know how to make a braid. And then you're just going to make a knot at the end, and there's your tie. And here's your little newborn Teo hat. And you can make it without flaps. You can make it without ties. And you can add a crochet border if you want. This is an old one. I think this is the very first one I made. So there you go. That's how you make a Teo hat.